Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nate Matthews Leader, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Maggie and Tim, and we are the Inside Agents. On this weekly podcast, we'll be discussing hot topics around football and the sports industry from two agents' perspectives.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with another episode of the Inside Agents, and today we have a very special guest. We have joining us today Daniel Geey, football attorney, author with the Sheridans law firm in the UK. Thank you for joining us, Daniel.
Mate, it's an absolute pleasure, and glad to be on the conversation. Always good to chat to like-minded people, and looking forward to the chat.
Absolutely. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, today is with great pleasure that we introduce Daniel Geey to the show. For those that don't know, Daniel Geey is probably one of my favorite, and I'm sure Nate can agree with this, like one of our favorite attorneys, just overall, sports, attorneys. He's amazing. And he is also regarded as UK's most highly respected sports lawyer. Some of his clients include the Premier League, Champions League, football clubs, agencies, rights holders, other sports companies. He's the media go-to guy when it comes to a lot of complex legal matters. So whether that's speaking on Sky Sports, BBC, CNN, BT Sport, Bloomberg, BBC Radio, you name it. And he's also an author of one of my favorite books called Done Deal. It's a highly recommended book, changed my life, really helped me get adjusted into the football industry as an agent. And so I'm super excited to have you here, Daniel, and welcome to the Inside Agents.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that background and introduction. I think I feel about 5 foot taller now, so that's good.
Absolutely. So Daniel, please share with our audience, how did you get into sports law?
Yeah, the very short answer is, just like all of us, we're all soccer and football fans in the beginning. And I grew up in a football mad family as a Liverpool supporter. I went to all the games, consumed all the content, but that was when content wasn't on the internet. It was when content was basically in newspapers and magazines and things, physical things that you would find. And, fast forward a particular period of time now where we're in this sort of digital data, everything immediately, infinite age of information sharing and information consuming state. I sort of transitioned between my mum is and was a tennis player. My dad is a lawyer. So I sort of transitioned into the world of sports and law for an undergrad degree in law and politics, and then a master's degree in competition law and football broadcasting rights, and then started at a law firm called Jones Day, an American law firm. Spent 2 years there doing my training, and got involved in some cool football stuff and sports stuff generally. But the truth is, going back to the essence of the question, I was doing a whole range of different topics and sectors for quite a long time. I've been a lawyer, lucky enough to be a lawyer for just over 15 years now. And I've been working in sectors as diverse as pharmaceuticals to telco to financial services to automotives to aviation to agriculture, and obviously sport and football a lot more recently. But it's been a long slog in the short term, at least, to be able to transition from being a lawyer across lots of different sectors to getting involved more in one particular sector, sport, and even a micro sector, football being that one as well too.
Amazing.
Wow. Daniel, just to follow up, what does a day in the life of a football agent look like? Or a football lawyer, I should say, sorry.
Yeah, well, for sports lawyer and a football lawyer, the truth is that, it's it's weird to say, but it sounds a lot sexier than it is, because really what I am is, and I know you guys have heard me speak about this before, is the truth is, I'm called a football lawyer, but actually I'm a commercial contracts lawyer. I'm an intellectual property lawyer. I'm a disputes lawyer. I'm a regulations lawyer. I'm a mediation and arbitration lawyer. I am a solutions finder. I'm a reputation management lawyer. So I cut across an awful lot of topics that are quite specific to sports and specific to football. So briefly, I could be doing a commercial ambassador agreement. I could then be drafting a settlement agreement for a dispute. I could then be handling an agent's mediation or arbitration proceedings. I could then be dealing with someone that's said something on Twitter or Instagram or done something on Tinder or otherwise they shouldn't have been doing, and the disciplinary process that a club might instigate in terms of that. Sometimes it might just be that players and or agents or a number of my other clients will just phone up asking for my particular experiences in certain things that have gone on in the past and to offer help or guidance just more generally. So a lot of the time it's, you gotta, thank goodness I've built up quite a lot of practical knowledge and understanding about the industry through doing, but that also comes from, listening to people and actually trying to help people in the first place, finding solutions and then be able to use that experience to be able to further help that client or other clients too.
Amazing, amazing. And so with that, how do you say, or would you say agents and lawyers, if they're generally looking to work together within the field, how would you describe that relationship and what that looks like for agents and attorneys?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that there's always a little bit of, not complication is the wrong word, but until an agent realizes the benefit that a lawyer can bring to the deal, whatever it might be, sometimes agents will see lawyers as not necessarily the most important part of the process, because we tend to hold up things, unfortunately. We tend to cause more conflict. We tend to delay things. But that is through the eyes of someone else, simply because what we are trying to do is protect the best interests of our client. And a lot of the time, what can sometimes happen is there can be a particular clause in an image rights deal. There can be a particular definition in an employment contract. There can be ambiguity in a commercial deal. There can be issues with an indemnity in, another type of contract. So, my issue, unfortunately, is I'm there to find the holes in things. And a lot of the time, when things are quite time sensitive, there can be big personalities involved. The player and the agent, a lot of the time, when they're including a lawyer in the process, are quite close to the end of the process. So they're obviously very keen on trying to get any deals done, and rightly so. What I am always balancing is making sure that my client understands the risk of doing things in a particular way, versus not unduly delaying things, but understanding that if we do it in this way, this will mean this. And if we hold back on this and do it in a particular way, then this will happen. And so sometimes I feel, it's a great question, I have a difficult balancing act between trying to get the deal over the line, but very much trying to use any leverage and negotiation power to be able to get things done the right way to the benefit of my client. And it happened a few windows again. I remember it very clearly, is that we'd almost got the deal over the line with a particular transfer, but we were waiting for one club to provide a document, really. And I explained to the agent that we needed to get that done before we could conclude the deal. And the club and everybody was going crazy at me because effectively the lawyer was holding up the deal. But the truth is that it was very important for us to get that particular piece of information before the deal could close. So everybody was very annoyed with me at the time. But again, my client recognized the value of what I was doing, which the easy option would have been, fine, go ahead and do the deal. The hard thing sometimes to say is no. And that's what can sometimes be the most important thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And would you say, or would you suggest that most football agents possibly go to law school prior to becoming a football agent? So maybe having that law background before they become an agent, or at least having basic knowledge of law could maybe help
Yeah, look, there are plenty of top agents that don't have a law background whatsoever, that have people around them that can effectively not shield, but effectively add value to the proposition. And that's what happens a lot of the time. As you get more senior and do deals and increase your network and find opportunities and do more transactions, etc., you get to see how things work on the inside more, so you get to understand which of the clauses are more important, what are the things to look out for, where it's important to maybe gain an external lawyer for their help in particular ways. So that for me is ultimately sometimes the most important thing, which is just as in life, and it's the same with me, and it's the same with agents, and certainly the same with lawyers, is sometimes it's important to recognize your strengths, but also understand your weaknesses, and then try and mitigate your weaknesses as much as possible to make sure that the deal, the negotiation, the discussions, the exchange, the quid pro quo, whatever else is covered. And so, unless there's a particular regulatory requirement that says you have to have gone to law school to be an agent, then I don't think it's imperative. I almost think sometimes those other skills that agents have, which lawyers don't have, which is sometimes practicalities, thinking on their feet, solutions orientated, great network, building personal relationships, getting things done, dealing with rejection, all of the usual things are equally as important as surrounding yourselves with the right people.
Speaking of contracts, Daniel, quick question. I know you've seen a lot of football players now with COVID. Ryan Frazier, for example, deciding that once his contract's up June 30th, he's like, I'm not playing at all. Like, I don't want to see out the contract. I don't want to extend it. What clauses do you expect to be seen in contracts that agents and lawyers have never seen before? If you could touch on that.
Yep. Well, the first thing is I actually have sympathy in those type of scenarios for both sides, is the truth. This is such an unforeseen eventuality. And I think the point on something like Fraser as well is he has to be very careful about protecting himself, unless there is a very, very strong insurance policy that he could sign and then signs a short-term deal. What happens if he tears his cruciate ligament his second game back? He's a free agent. Bournemouth probably aren't going to offer him a long-term deal, and he needs to protect his position to some degree. And he protects his position by not getting himself injured and possibly signing a very lucrative 4 or 5 year deal, maybe with a top English or European club. So what will be interesting to see in the summer is any renegotiations that happen, how they can best mitigate those types of circumstances, because what we're actually dealing with is quite a systemic change to the way that the football transfer system and registration windows function. Never before for a long time have we seen the season extended, which doesn't necessarily align with the ideal of, or rather the practicalities of when contracts end. So, let's hope that in a particular period of time, we're not in that particularly stronger position to have to deal with these things in the longer term. But the truth also is that we don't know what the future may hold in 6 months to 9 months. And unless maybe, for example, the PFA, the Professional Football Association, maybe start some type of collective bargaining agreement or some type of negotiation / wider systemic structural discussion with football stakeholders, it will be down to individual bilateral agreements. But you would say if there was agreement signed pretty soon, that you would have thought that in 2 or 3 years' time, it won't necessarily, hopefully, be that relevant anymore.
Awesome. Amazing. Advice and just information regarding contracts. And speaking of contracts, so to piggyback off of what Nate, asked, have you ever encountered maybe a difficult transfer throughout your career that you were working on for a particular football client?
Everyone.
Okay, so what would you say was the most challenging one?
There's lots, and obviously, I can't,
Of course.
speak on particular issues because due to confidentiality. But just like every transaction, a lot of the time there'll be lots of issues at play. It might well be that they're close to transfer deadline times, which then heightens everybody's need to get the deal over the line. It might well be that a club puts in particular clauses, which in my view might be difficult to accept, and therefore you're having quite a lot of quite terse and tense conversations with the club to try and explain the player's position. It might well be that the player and the agent aren't in a very particularly strong position and have to take some of the clauses that are on the table, and vice versa. Sometimes it might well be that the player is in a very strong position and you can push quite hard on particular clauses because you know that the club desperately wants the player to sign. But a lot of the time, just like anything, it's to do with trying to maintain good communication between your client and the other side, and trying to understand, to know where you're willing to give, where you want to stay strong, where you want to be able to push back, without potentially endangering the deal, because that's ultimately the point. No agent's going to work for you if you are so difficult in your negotiation that the deal is effectively derailed as a result. So there's always that difficult balancing act. But again, it's always just trying to manage the personalities involved and try and communicate those points to the other side to explain why they're important for you and why we can find a solution or a compromise or a midway point.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Daniel. Daniel, just another quick question. Well, this is more opinion based. I want your opinion because you mentioned collective bargaining. I know in the MLS, they're big on that. So before our season kicked off, the MLS Players Association and MLS agreed a bargaining deal. Then when COVID shut down the league, the commission itself decided that they wanted to enter a force majeure clause in all the contracts, which basically stated that for any unforeseen event like this, they can unilaterally decide to slash player contracts. So just in general, do you think that in Europe more they'll be leaning towards having collective bargaining agreements and minimum and maximums, or do you not think that's possible in Europe?
It's a great question on sort of structural changes to how things may happen as a result of what we're seeing at the moment, and it's a great question. I'm not necessarily convinced in the short term that there will be such systemic change in terms of collective bargaining to a degree, but I think other things are happening at the same time. So, for example, it was just announced today that UEFA are effectively making their financial fair play rules more flexible to take into account for the revenue decreases that clubs will have effectively forecast because of everything that's happened from COVID in the last few months. In the same way, structurally things are changing a bit in the lower leagues of the English EFL, because there are significant reports that there's going to be equivalent of wage caps possibly introduced in League One and League Two. There are the equivalents of the UEFA rules to a degree in the Premier League. They're not called the financial fair play rules, they're called the profitability regulations. But I think structurally there might be things that may occur to tighten rules to a degree in some ways, but also give clubs that flexibility. So it's a great point. I think, out of crisis usually comes change. We saw it with, we saw it back in 2010 with Portsmouth going into administration in the Premier League. The Premier League then implemented their own equivalent regulations to stop that occurring in the end. UEFA implement their FFP regulations because of the 1.7 billion euro collective loss that European clubs participating in their competitions had more or less encountered. We saw when third-party ownership and third-party investment issues had occurred because of Tevez and Mascherano, and the Premier League, FA, EFL, and then FIFA bring in that prohibition. So it's usually in times of regulatory, economic, circumstantial crises that then usually regulations are beefed up in order to take into account of those types of externalities. And I think that's likely, again, is the truth.
Well, it's a great topic. Great answer. Great answer. Just to switch over to another topic that I know you're great in, we're just going to talk about networking. So what tips do you have for networking in sports for anyone in the business?
Well, the good news is at the moment, Nate, I'm actually, so based on the YouTube clips that I know that you course that I know you and Maggie watched as well, I'm trying actually to try and put together a small book, a short book on how best to try and get ahead in any industry, but in my experiences, maybe in sports as well. And there are lots of things, is the truth, but some based on my experience, some based on what mentors have taught me over the years, and some based on my experiences of failing miserably and trying to find better ways to be able to do things. And my short answer is, for networking, is you just got to start somewhere. That's the honest truth. You've got to be proactive. And I don't want to make it sound all airy-fairy or difficult to try and do. And part of the YouTube course I was trying to do is to try and give people some sort of tangible steps to actually take. So for those that hadn't seen the course, which is most of the world, but in any event, some of the pointers that I tried to get across were, all of us, and it goes back to the first thing we talked about, all of us are able to consume large amounts of content on our phones, on our computers, via blogs, via podcasts, great podcasts that you guys are doing, via TED Talks, via books, whatever else it might be. And my first sort of starter for 10 on that first day was, get into habits of reading content in your sweet spot, or in the spot that you want to build expertise and try and build a career in. And then start contacting those people that write those great pieces of content. Say how much you enjoyed them, mention particular points, make it quite specific, be quite precise. And that's how you start building a bit of a network, is the truth. It can obviously come from the people that you're reading articles from, but ultimately then is that what you can try and do is look within the realm of the people that you already connect with. It might be on LinkedIn, it might be in your phone book, it might be on your email, and you start almost to build your own internal ecosystem. And this is what I mentioned on one of the other days, which is to try and almost picture your network, your own internal network, and then try and find ways to connect people to each other, to try and find additional people that can connect into your network, so that you start visualizing your ecosystem that then gets bigger and bigger as necessary. So the very short answer to the very good question in terms of networking is, start straight away very small, but aim big. But what you need to do in the meantime is start with 1, go on to 5 people, get 10, start interacting with people, build knowledge, share knowledge, explain the type of stuff that you can do, share things that you read, and bit by bit, step by step, month by month, you start expanding that network more than you ever believe, really, rather than just being like, I don't know where to start and I don't know how I can do it, and what's the point? When you see those tangible steps leading to things, then that's always a really good step. And I think, what you guys mentioned to me beforehand, which is how you guys met from listening to one of my YouTube courses, is just a brilliant example of that great proactivity. And it made me very proud, actually, that you guys took on board one of the things that I'd said, which was, proactivity and think about how you can grow your network. And look what you guys are doing now. It's amazing. It's fantastic.
You're gonna make me
Thank
blush,
you.
Daniel.
Thank you so much.
Daniel,
I
there's
know.
been so
Thank you
many
so much.
podcasts where we've all shouted you out so many times, just about
So many.
we wouldn't be together if it weren't for you. So thank you.
Yep. So we're forever grateful to you. And just to piggyback off of Nate's question, and when we talk about networking, and we talked about, so far your experience within law, I'm a huge advocate for females, of course, for women within sports especially, and really encouraging women to start looking at becoming football agents or even football attorneys. And so what advice do you have for not just females wanting to get into, let's say, sports law or football law in particular, but just a lot of those students who are, in universities now and they're trying to become the next Daniel Geey or, another attorney or at least another football attorney? What advice would you share?
Well, it's a great one, because my view is that I think people put too much pressure on themselves to it almost be, if I can't do it now, it's not for me. And if I don't get a response from if I don't get a response from the 5 or 10 agents that I've emailed or that I've tried to get in touch with, then it's obviously because I'm not good enough, and as a result, I need to try my hand at something else. And that's effectively a really important point. And there's a few points stemming from that. The first is, if it's your passion, if it's something that you really want to get involved in, you have to think about it as a long-term project, not a short-term aspiration. And if you can change your mindset to, it doesn't need to happen now because I want this in the long term, and as a result of wanting this in the long term, I'm going to invest in the short to medium term to get there, you immediately become you put less pressure on yourself to achieve in the short term, because you're doing it because you're interested in it. You're doing it because you want to grow. You're doing it because you're humble enough to believe you don't know everything that there is in the industry. But the way that you go about it is through, knowledge building, through process, through reading stuff, through sharing with others, through connecting, through believing that you're good enough in the long term to be able to do it, and through effectively, probably the most important one, building your skill set into the areas that you think will best serve you for the situation that you're going to find yourself in. And P.S., building that skill set absolutely doesn't need to be in sport in the short to medium term. And that's the thing that I've realized. I can only speak from my experiences. I've really been working in sport full-time 100% of my time for the last 5, 6, 7 years is the truth. Before that, that means I've spent half of my career doing non-sports work. But in the end, those skill sets, that ability to read regulations, to be able to understand how things work, to be able to draft good emails, to be able to communicate right, to be able to network and chat with people, to listen intently, all of the things that I can obviously still get better at, have held me in really good stead for how best to, get into the profession and stay there. So my thing that I said every day on the course was, don't worry about getting into sports in the short term. I know that it sounds ridiculously counterintuitive, but it's the truth, which is, if you want to, be the best sports marketing agent or work at the best sports marketing agency, it doesn't mean in the short term that you have to be in a sports marketing agency. How about be the best marketeer you can in lots of particular sectors, learn from brilliant people across the whole industry, full stop. And then if you're still reading 5 articles a day about sport, if you're still networking in the right circles, if you've got fantastic experience and knowledge about being a marketeer more generally, then you'll be in a much stronger position in 4 or 5 years' time when an advertised role comes up, when a particular opportunity that you hear about happens, from a person that you've networked with 3 or 4 years ago sends you a job profile that maybe everyone else hasn't seen. All of that puts you in the best position to be able to reap the rewards of the investment that you've made in the short to medium term.
Absolutely. And I know, I mean, for someone like myself, I'm a huge, huge advocate for everything that you said, including self-knowledge, right? And being able to educate yourself. Um, I mean, besides Done Deal, as one of myself and even Nate's favorite books, what are some good books that you recommend? So even if it's, whether it's law books, sports books, or just maybe business.
It just depends. If it's about sort of knowledge of the industry, then there's a couple of great ones that I've literally got on my shelf that I'm going to show you right now.
Yes,
because they're right here.
I think I've added all of your book recommendations. Some of them I read before, and then the new ones I added to my book collection. So.
Amazing. So yeah, what I've actually just done is I've set up lists on Amazon where people can find the football books or the sports books that I recommend, and then the sort of personal development books. And then it's, I think, on this Amazon influencer program. So then if someone buys from that site, then some money can go to charity that I raise. So that's hopefully the next step that I'm going to try and do for those particular things. But the books that I'd recommend, which I know you've already seen them, first one is How to Become a Football Agent by Dr. That I know you guys know.
Of course.
I've literally, because I've got my bookshelf here, so I can just hold up a few. The second is The Price of Football by Kieran Maguire. That's a really fantastic
I ordered that one. Good one.
So Kieran does his own podcast and is fantastic. You know, the book in between that is still one of my favorite books of all time, by one of my favorite authors called Michael Lewis, is Moneyball. Just because of the way,
Moneyball.
Yes.
You know, the truth is that I thought the film was okay, and that was, I think, maybe because the book, I
love the book too much.
Yeah, I hold it in such a high esteem and such a pedestal that it's almost like anything that isn't as equally as good is almost just not worthwhile even sort of speaking about. So that book I really enjoyed from both a sports and from a storytelling perspective. I've just finished two other books very briefly. Sorry, because I'm always a big advocate of reading, because I try. One is this. It's a great title. It's not supposed to be a mean title, but it's called Surrounded.
Wow! I read a brief synopsis of it, and I said, should I order this? I order this?
So it's more or less about how people are categorized into different colors, depending on their personality type, and then once you know yourself which type of colors you're more likely to fall into in categories, how best for you then to interact with others based on their own colors and character types. Which can become very interesting. And
that's amazing.
And then the last one, which I've literally just finished today, is this, which is actually really, really, really interesting. Sell is Human.
To sell to human. I gotta add that to the collection.
Yes, exactly. So, and then my next one, very briefly, which I've been recommended for ages, is this one. It's called Grit by Angela.
Oh yeah, Grit. Yeah,
Grit's classic.
I read Grit about 3 years ago. I read that book, and it was life-changing.
So I've read parts of it before, but then I put it down and didn't get back to it. So I'm gonna spend some time with the weekend, possibly, reading that, which is exciting. So
that's a good one.
So my idea really for the sort of idea for the career book is to take a few of the things from some of the books that I've read, mix it with some of my experiences and knowledge and what people have explained to me over the years, and try and put that out at some point. But that's gonna, I think, take a little bit of time to do, because I want to try and get a few of my ideas in order, but I think hopefully it can be done.
You definitely have a buyer from me for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, you already know we're huge supporters of you and just big fans of you. So anything that you put out, we're subscribing to. So that's, at least you get two, loyal fans here. So you've accomplished so much with your career, and I mean, you've built a successful career and legacy, if I will say, because in years to come, when we look back on publications like Done Deal and just even articles that you have, contributed, whether it was for The Guardian or The Independent, and what's next? What's next for Daniel Geey? Is it possibly starting a law firm? Is it possibly writing a sequel to Done Deal? How could you sum up what's next for you?
It's the truth is, it's whatever gets me excited about doing things. I think, like, as you guys probably can see with a lot of the things I do, I just like creating things. If that's the simplest way of doing stuff, is like, I love spending time with Dr. Urquhart, talking through ideas that he has on stuff, because he's literally the best doer in the world. When he says something, the most energized that I always get is that, like, 3 weeks later, it's like, it's done. He does it.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I
I
went on a trip to India with him. We were talking about a few ideas that we've had on stuff. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to do this, and this happened. And I get back, and like 3 weeks later, it's like, it's done, and things have happened. And so my wife even explained to me when I got back from India with a trip with him, when I was lecturing for the week over in Mumbai, which was an amazing experience. I was just like energized for weeks, because it was like the process of imparting knowledge, but also, you know, speaking and trying to say interesting things was the truth, and find interesting avenues to be able to collaborate with him on. And so, you know, as you can probably see, it's like I just like creating through trying to help. So that could be in podcasts, it could be from Done Deal, it might be a second edition, although it was a lot of work. And probably have to be a COVID section, to put it mildly. My focus actually on the non-creative stuff, or rather the non-law stuff, is to probably try and write this career book in the next year or so, or 9 months. That's what's getting me very excited at the moment. My other ideas on the charity side that I do a different bits of variety on, which is I'm the chairman of a charity called Football Aid, which is a great cause, which is basically a diabetes charity. I work across all of my clients to be able to help give to a number of children's hospices and hospitals in the UK, which is very rewarding as well, is the truth.
Yes.
I've got my fashion brand 13 that you may have seen.
Yes.
Yep.
So,
please shout it out. We'll share all the links.
Thank you. And so
I was trying to put in my order for one.
Good.
For this time, but
Amazing.
it didn't come in time.
Thank you.
It didn't come in time.
We can do the second one, and then we can all have them. We'll do a joint.
Yes. And
oh
the
yes,
shirts
the second
too.
one we will all have the 13th year.
Yes.
For sure.
Amazing.
The shirts as well.
That's like energy. That I find a lot of positive energy from doing that as well. And you know, that's nothing to do with then the day job, working at Sheridan's, doing the work which is the mainstay of the stuff that I'm trying to do day in, day out, working with a fantastic team alongside me in the sports group that I love working with day in, day out. So I think it's almost like, you know, how can I keep doing the same type of things? How can I keep balancing enough plates? How I can keep being energized by the fun stuff that I like doing. And a lot of it is just because technology is at such a stage now where, you know, the world in a way is your oyster. You know, 4 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do a podcast because you would require a studio for it. Now all you need is your smartphone or a Zoom call, and an app which distributes, you know, in the same way 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to start a charity fashion label. I wouldn't have been able to auction off football shirts online to be able to raise more money for good causes. And, you know, I wouldn't be able to have this conversation with you guys. So it's almost in a way the positivity of technology, which allows us to be able to do so many good things. And I'm just trying to embrace that, really, is the truth.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
Amazing.
Please, before we go, let our viewers know where to find you on your social media, please.
Okay, I'll start at the top. So we've got Twitter, which is, Football Law. Instagram is the same, which is Football Law. I'm actually on TikTok, although you'll be pleased to know I'm not dancing or singing.
Rats.
I'm Football Law on TikTok. LinkedIn is just my search name. On YouTube, I'm Daniel Geey, Geey. And then have I missed out anything? I probably have. Yeah, then the shop to buy all the 13 merchandise, including this cap and other stuff, is 13 shop. That's 13shop.co.uk. And I think, oh yeah, and then you can buy Done Deal on Amazon, really, which is probably the easiest way to buy it. And I think I'm running out of links now.
And LinkedIn, major
Yes.
one.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, so just search my name and you guys, everyone find me and can connect.
Absolutely. And Daniel, once again, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us. I mean, Nate, I'm sure you can attest to this, but I learned a lot just from this conversation. I learned even more, just from this conversation. So I'm sure our audience is going to love it. And we thank you so much for joining us here at the Inside Agents.
Pleasure, and great stuff, great proactivity. So I'm looking forward to listening it back and listening to the episodes too.
Absolutely. And we thank you guys for joining us for another episode of the Inside Agents, and we will see you next week. Thank you.